This is something that happened back in the year 2003. I'm a female and was 23 years old at the time. I had just recently joined a bowling league because I have always enjoyed bowling. I was okay, but after the first time bowling with the team, I realized that I needed more practice. So there was this kind of small bowling alley pretty close to where I lived. I remember that one night, I asked a few friends if they wanted to go with me, but they were not able to. Instead of not going, I decided to bowl by myself to get the practice. So that night, I went to the alley. It was not that busy, and like I said, the place was kind of small and also old. I got the lane on the very far right end of the alley, which was nice because it felt more private. I set my stuff on one of the several chairs they had right in front of the lanes. Nobody was bowling at any of probably the next 5 lanes to my left. So I bowled a few games and was getting some good practice in. I had been there for almost an hour when I turned around after bowling one time and suddenly realized that there was a man sitting at my lane. He was in one of the seats not far away from my stuff at all. The man was sort of large, was bald, and had a goatee, and from just his chin the hair was really long. He also had several tattoos. I did not know where he had come from. He appeared to just be watching me bowl. I thought that maybe he would say something to me, but he did not. He just kept sitting there, so I just kept bowling. It was awkward to say the least, but I only had several more frames before I was done, and then I would be leaving. The man just kept sitting there the entire time. I thought about saying something to him, like asking him what he was doing, but I didn't. So before long, I was done bowling. I went and sat in a seat just 2 away from him and changed out of my bowling shoes. Then I got my stuff. In that entire time, the man still did not say anything. After that, I went up to return the bowling shoes. The man did not get up when I did. After I had returned the shoes, I looked back to the lane that I bowled at, and the man was now gone. I figured that he left, and then I headed for the exit. There was a parking lot on the side of the building, which is where I had parked. I walked over to the side door, and there were 2 sets of doors. When I went through the first one, I noticed the man was standing in the small area between the next set of doors. I got a bad feeling when I saw him. I walked past and then out the doors and into the parking lot. Moments later, I heard the door open again. I knew that the man was now leaving, and I wondered if he was following me. There were several cars scattered around the parking lot. It was not well lit and pretty dark outside. The town was pretty quiet as well, but there were some other places nearby. So as I was walking to my car, I heard footsteps behind me, and they sounded somewhat fast. I was going to my vehicle, but I just had a bad feeling about it. Just going with my instincts, I changed directions and did not go to my car anymore. I walked more towards the front of the parking lot where there was a sidewalk. When I turned, I heard the guy turning behind me. I walked to the sidewalk and then started going down it. I didn't know where I was going at first, but I saw that this bar was open just down the street, so I started heading in that direction. The man behind me followed the entire way. However, luckily he did not catch up to me, but maintained a distance. It was very obvious that he was following me though, so I kept going down the sidewalk and was able to make it to the bar. I had only been there once before, so I didn't know it that well, and I didn't know anybody inside. But I went inside and there were a good number of other people around, so I felt safer. The man went inside as well though. I stood around near the bar, and the man stood at the other end of it. I then walked towards the bathrooms. I was going to go into the women's restroom and call one of my friends. Luckily, I did have my cell phone with me. However, when I reached the hallway where the restrooms were, I noticed that they had a back exit, so I decided to just leave through there. The man would not notice because he couldn't see from where he was, and probably assumed that I just went to use the restroom. I left and then literally ran all the way back to my car. Luckily, I was able to make it. I then drove home and made it back okay. I still feel to this day that I avoided possibly a terrible situation. I don't know who that guy was, but I know for a fact that he was following me. I went to that same bowling alley several more times and never saw him there again. I had a really creepy experience happen the last time I went bowling. It was a couple of years ago, and I went to a bowling alley that's probably like 10 minutes from where I live. Now, I went with two of my friends, Ashley and Lizzie. I can't remember how, but Lizzie had several games of free bowling at this particular alley, so we were using them, and the place was actually pretty nice. There was also an arcade and a bar and many food options inside as well. It was pretty busy that night, and most of the lanes, if not all of them, were being used. I remember that probably like 30 minutes into bowling, this employee guy came up to us. He asked us how everything was going, and we said good. He came back like 20 minutes later again and asked us once more, and then he said that our lane had had some problems recently. We said everything had been working fine, and it had been. The guy then told us to let him know if anything happened. We thought the place just had good service and he was friendly, but the guy approached us again not long after that. He asked us if we were having a good time again, specifically me, and by now it seemed kind of weird how he kept coming up to us. This place was not like Topgolf or some bowling alleys, where as you're playing you have a waiter or a waitress and they get you food and stuff. For this bowling alley, you just ordered food up at the counter, and it was like most of them, so I wasn't really sure why this employee kept going up to us, and seemingly nobody else. After we told him that we were still having a good time, he asked us if we had any plans for later. We told him we were just hanging out, and maybe we'd get some food. We didn't really know for sure. The guy then asked us if we lived around there, and we said yes. During this time, we were all in college, but back home for the summer. This guy appeared to be around our same age, maybe slightly older, and after talking briefly about how we were in college and stuff, he left. It just seemed like a friendly employee for the most part, but a little bit off. A short time later though, I went back to the table behind our bowling lane to get a drink of water. When I did, the man was standing behind it. He told me that I was pretty good at bowling, which also indicated that he had been watching me. He then invited me to come back and bowl with him another time, saying we could bowl for free because he worked there. It seemed by this point like he was probably interested in me, and that's why he kept going up to us. I was nice, but I told him that I was not much of a bowler and I would not be doing that. He tried convincing me for a moment, but then it was my turn to bowl again and my friends called me over. I left, and they asked me why the guy was talking to me again. After this, I figured that he wouldn't be back. But only about 10 minutes later, he returned. He just walked up to us like he was part of the friend group. The guy told us that he was getting off very soon, and he was going to this club and asked if we wanted to join him. He then went on to say how the club was supposedly really hard to get into, but he knew the bouncer. We found this an odd thing for an employee to say to us, and did not have an interest in joining him, so we declined. He finally left us alone after that. Now, at this point, we did not have much more bowling left, and finished within probably 20 minutes. After that, when we were at the counter returning our shoes to an employee, a different employee, she asked us how it went. Lizzie told her that an employee of theirs kept bothering us the whole time. The girl working asked us who it was, and we described him to her. She was confused and said she didn't think anybody looking like that worked there. We looked around to see if he was still within sight. The place was really crowded. After looking around for maybe 10 seconds though, I noticed him. He was sitting at a random table by himself, sipping a drink. When we pointed him out, she said she had no idea who he was, but was confident that he did not work there. Then she told us she would be going to ask him who he was. At that point though, we all just left. We had taken Lizzie's car and she drove the three of us. After leaving the bowling alley, we went to a local restaurant in town and stayed there for probably almost an hour. Then we continued back, and Lizzie dropped me off back at my house. She pulled into the driveway and I got out. Then they left. As I was walking up to my house, I remember hearing another car driving down the street. Our street was usually very quiet, and I just looked over to see it. When I did, I saw the car come slowing down and appeared to pull over on the side of the road in front of our house. I was still walking towards the front door of my house, but I slowed down to see the person. What I saw next was the car pulling over and the driver's window rolling down. I saw that the same guy from the bowling alley was driving the car. I quickly hurried up to get inside. I got out my keys and tried to unlock the door as quickly as possible. When I was doing this, I actually heard the car door opening and then closing right after. I also heard footsteps and knew that the guy was approaching. Before he was able to get even halfway into the yard though, I got the door open. I quickly went inside and then locked the door behind me. I hurried to find my parents and let them know of the situation. Maybe 30 seconds to a minute later, we returned to the front of the house and looked out of a window. When we did, the man and his car were gone. He had left. And after that, he didn't come back either. I'm still pretty creeped out by the situation. To go to my house, he must have followed my friends and I the entire rest of the night. I'm not sure what he was planning to do going to my house. I'm just glad that he didn't come back. I went bowling last year with my friend Alex. We both like bowling and always have a fun time, even though neither of us is really that good. I remember that we went to this one bowling alley that neither of us had been to before. We have a main one that we typically go to, but we also like to discover the other nearby places and compare. This alley in particular was all right. It was not that large and had a pretty average setup. So when we got to the bowling alley, it was earlier in the night. We went up and bought a few games, then got our shoes and headed to our assigned lane. After bowling the first game, we pretty much started the next one right after. At this time, the alley was still pretty quiet, with a few other people bowling to our left, but several lanes away. I remember that randomly, in the middle of the game, something really strange happened. You know the screens that show the people's scores and give animations for a strike and stuff? Well, on our screen, it just said my name, first and last, in very basic font. To that point, it had been normal. It had shown our scores and the games and that kind of stuff. Well, now it was just my name, and the entire rest of the screen was just blue. It was so weird, and I figured it to be a glitch. But then I realized that I had never told the people here my name. I mean, I had paid with my debit card, so possibly they got the information that way. But why would it be on the screen like that? Plus, the names that Alex and I chose for our games to be on the screen were just our initials, not our full names. I was just staring at the screen, waiting for it to go back to the screen with our scores on it. But instead of changing to that, it then changed to a picture on the screen. It was grainy, but I soon realized that it was a picture from a security camera. It was taken of Alex and me as we walked into the bowling alley that night, less than an hour prior. That picture stayed on the screen for like 30 seconds. Then it changed again, this time to more security camera footage. It was a brief clip of us walking inside of the bowling alley. The clip replayed several times, and after that, there was another security camera clip, this time of me actually bowling. Now, none of these clips were very good quality, but I could still tell what it was. It must have been taken just minutes earlier. Alex and I were just staring at the screen with amazed looks on our faces. We had absolutely no idea why this was happening or who was responsible. I was about to go walk up to the service desk when it finally changed back to our game. I still looked over to the desk. I thought maybe I would see some employee watching us and laughing or something, but I didn't. I saw the same girl who had been at the desk when we entered. She appeared to be about high school or college age, and she was seemingly at the desk the entire time. I doubted that she was responsible for this. We decided to just keep bowling. So we bowled our next games, and nothing else strange happened. Then we were done. When we went back up to the desk to talk to the girl. The same girl was still working. When we were there, I decided to bring up the strange occurrence. I told her about what we saw on the screen and stuff. The girl seemed confused and said that she didn't deal with any of the TVs and didn't know why that would happen. I asked her if somebody else working might have done that, and she said that she didn't think so. I wasn't really sure what else to do about it, so Alex and I then just left. We were talking about it for the rest of the night though. I'm confident that it was an employee who did it, but I don't know who or why. To me, it just creeps me out. I don't know anybody who works at that bowling alley. Possibly they were just bored from it being a slow night and are really good with computers. I'm not great with computer stuff, so maybe someone who hears this can tell me their thoughts on it. To this day though, I get kind of freaked out thinking back to it. I've not been back to that bowling alley since either. I had a terrifying experience once when I used to work at a bowling alley. I worked there when I was 19 years old for several months. This was many years ago now, but I still remember it very well. So I did a bit of everything around the place. We were not that large of a bowling alley, but had what you would expect. This story takes place one night when I was working, and the bowling alley was not too busy that evening. I was working until close, which on this particular night was 11 p.m. We had several people working early, but at the time of close, it was just me and one other person. So during the 10 o'clock hour, my coworker was in the back organizing things. There were just a couple people bowling, and by 10:30, they had all left. So at this point, I remained working behind the main counter near the entrance and in front of the lanes, and my coworker was behind me in the back. I remember that at about 10:45, I noticed a man walking into the bowling alley. It seemed a little bit strange, because we closed in just 15 minutes. Maybe he didn't know that we were closing soon, but he would not even have time to bowl one game. The guy was wearing a black jacket and a hat as well. I didn't really get a good look at his face, but after entering, the man did not even look at me or go up to my counter. He blew right past me and walked faster down near the lanes, as if he knew exactly where he was going. But he couldn't be meeting anybody here or anything. Nobody else was here. I was confused by it, but I also figured he would be gone very soon, because he obviously wasn't going to be bowling. He then went out of my sight, and I went into the back to speak with my coworker for a minute. When I came back, I looked around and did not see the man. I figured he had left. I stayed behind the counter until 11. Then I went to go lock the doors. But before doing so, I went all around the bowling alley, just making sure that the man had in fact left. He was not there, so I continued. After that, there were just a few things that I had to do before I could leave. One of those was to turn off all the bowling lanes, which you had to do behind them. This is something that I had done many times before. So I walked around to enter the small back area behind the lanes near where the pins are. As soon as I entered it, I instantly saw the man. It was the same guy who had recently entered the bowling alley. I did not know what he was doing back there. The guy looked right at me. I was so surprised about seeing him. At first, I didn't know what to say or do. After staring at each other for a few moments, I was about to tell the guy that he wasn't allowed to be back there. But before I could, he started to aggressively charge towards me. He was maybe 20 feet away, so I quickly moved back and out of the room. I got back out into the walkway next to the lanes. I did not hear the guy leaving, but I ran all the way to the back room where my coworker was. I closed the door and told him about the guy back there. We both decided to call the police. Then we waited where we were in the back. We did not hear anything from the rest of the bowling alley and didn't dare leave the back room. When the cops got there, they searched the entire place, but the man was gone. He must have left some time while we waited. After that, my coworkers and I were able to finish closing up and leave. I was at a bowling alley several months ago and had one of the craziest experiences of my life. I went there with 3 friends. So it was 4 of us bowling and the place was somewhat busy, but nothing crazy. I'm alright at bowling, and I'm sort of particular about the bowling ball that I use. This was my first time at this particular bowling alley. I first used this one bowling ball, but I didn't really like the feel of it, so I went to one of the nearby racks that had balls, and I found one that was really good. It was this green ball, and when I started using it, it just felt great. So my friends and I continued bowling, and after our first game, we decided to do another one. Now, this game was going really well for me, and I was winning with one of my better scores of all time to that point. Right smack in the middle of the game, I remember this man approached us. I had not seen him before and didn't know where he had come from. The man was somewhat short and a little thin, but had longer hair and a mustache. After approaching me, he told me that I was using his ball. Then he pointed to the green ball. He said he saw me using it, but he needed to take it back now. I asked him if he actually owned the ball. He said no, but he used it every time he came to this bowling alley. He claimed that he couldn't bowl without it. The man's overall way of talking and behavior came off as rude to me. In my opinion, I already had the ball, and I didn't need to just give it up to him right in the middle of my game because he wanted it. I said no, but he could have it when I was done. The man then said that he needed it now. He tried walking closer to just take it. I stepped in front of him, and he actually pushed me to the side a little. I was shocked, and then watched the man take the ball and walk away. I was angry and wanted badly to grab him and punch him in the face, but obviously I thought better of it and I did nothing. I watched him go back to his lane and then start bowling with the ball. And this guy was not bowling in some serious league, but just appeared to be bowling with friends like I was. I found another ball that wasn't nearly as good, and in between my bowls I was kind of looking over at the man a lot. I remember I noticed him just standing around a lot between his turns. His whole friend group really seemed to be taking their time. I looked around all the other racks of balls to find one that I liked, but there were none. At one point, the man kind of walked away from the lanes. So when he did, I walked right back over, took the ball, and brought it back to my lane. Then I continued to use it. I mean, the guy had taken my ball right in the middle of one of the best games of my life. For about 10 more minutes, I had it. Then, out of nowhere, the man suddenly walked over again and took the ball back. But instead of going back to his lane, I watched him walk right out of the doors of the bowling alley. I had no idea what that was all about. I guessed he was stealing the ball. I ended up just getting another ball and finishing bowling with that one. And by the way, I did not bowl nearly as good with that ball, and my great game was ruined. So after we were done bowling, we went to leave. When I made it out to the parking lot, I noticed that my windshield was all cracked. I realized what had happened. The man had more than likely taken the bowling ball and smashed my windshield with it. I called the police and reported it, as well as told the bowling alley. After an investigation, security camera footage did in fact show the man breaking my windshield. I'm not sure how he knew that car was mine, but he did. The man was later tracked down and apprehended, but this remains one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me.